Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of DEMOPOD, the Demolition Podcast, Talking Disaster. Thank you, Producer Dan, for that little tag. We always get in the YouTube comments, guys. I don't know how often you're checking those YouTube comments. We always get recommendations. It should have been called Demo Listen. It should have been called whatever. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, we have our name. We're sticking with it, but you guys can have as much fun with it as you want. Keep commenting, liking, subscribing. We're back with another episode, and this is going to be a very fun one because we're going to be paying homage to some of the unsung heroes of professional wrestling. They've been called jobbers. They've been called preliminary wrestlers. They've been called enhancement talents. And I feel like, they need to be respected because they made so many of our childhoods as fans, and they made you guys, the talent, look amazing because back in the day, you didn't get main event talent wrestling free, against each other on free TV. You basically would have a superstar from the World Wrestling Federation against a no-name guy. But sometimes those no-name guys kind of got their names by being those preliminary wrestlers, and they became famous in that regard. So it's all about the jobbers tonight on DemoPod. Barry and Bill, how you doing, guys?
Very good. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. And this is 8, right?
Yeah.
DemoPod 8.
Yeah. We're really cooking with gas here, guys.
I didn't think I was going to have 1. Now when they got 8.
Yeah, it's really amazing because, like I said, we started. I met you gentlemen through the Tommy Fierro 80s Wrestling Con a number of years ago, and we really hit it off. And you guys were talking about doing different projects, and it's come a long way. And I think that we've only really scratched the surface with how much fun we're going to have as things continue. But I wanted to do this episode because so much of my childhood watching Demolition wrestle were against these enhancement talents. And I still feel weird calling them jobbers because I feel like there's a sect of the wrestling fandom that uses it as a derogatory term. And I don't know if that's really appropriate because more often than not, a lot of these guys that were put in those roles were amazing wrestlers in their own right, but for whatever reason, that's what they were delegated into doing. It's really like, I guess, no different than a movie or television show, right? Where you have the main actors and then you have the supporting cast. The enhancement talents were just basically the supporting cast for the main roster stars. Would that be a fair assessment?
I like that term. I like that term supporting because without them, there's so many factors in having a good match. And of course, if you have a good opponent, that makes it even so much easier. A referee, the facility itself, but the supporting talent, I like that.
Yeah. And I respected every single one of those guys because when you'd meet them before the matches, they already knew what their job was to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about the match and do whatever, they wanted to make you look good, and that was their job, and they were phenomenal at it. And I know Bill feels like I do. We appreciated them more than you can even imagine.
A few episodes ago, we kind of peeled back the curtain because, hell, WWE's doing it with Unreal on Netflix. So we started to bring the fans into the locker room area during the golden era when you guys were there from 1987 to 1990. So we're going to do that a little bit right now with some of the quote-unquote jobbers from that era. But what's really interesting is that your first main roster feud in the WWE stemmed from a situation involving enhancement talent, aka jobbers. Demolition took on the team of Jim Evans and Brady Boone on an episode of Wrestling Challenge in 1987. And Jesse Ventura and Vince McMahon were on commentary, and Jesse Ventura started to let the fans know that Brady Boone was the cousin of Billy Jack Haynes, who at the time was teaming with Ken Patera. And Ventura, of course, was having some fun on commentary saying, that Billy Jack Haynes is quite a hostile individual, McMahon. How little did we know how things would turn out. But basically, after you guys complete that match, you take Brady Boone and you toss him over the top rope, and you're laying waste to Jim Evans, and Mr. Fuji is cheering you on, and he's got his cane, and he's orchestrating the whole deal. And Brady Boone wants to be heroic, and he comes back in, and you guys quickly start to lay him out again. And that's when Ken Patera and Billy Jack Haynes ran out to make the save, and then you guys were off to the races with your feud. Is that something that comes up well in advance? You have a meeting with Vince or whoever's in charge of creative, and they're like, okay, how do we find a way to get this feud off the ground? Or is it just something where you show up at TV that day and they're like, this is what's happening?
Well, I think that in a lot of cases, especially with Vince, it was spur of the moment. I know he wanted to use Ken in a positive way. And I think Billy Jack probably hadn't been in there very long, had he, Barry?
No, he wasn't in there very long.
And of course, Billy Jack was a big star in the Northwest. Great look to his gimmick. So, and I was unaware, to be honest with you, until you mentioned it, that they had tagged him as the cousin or the family member of Brady Boone. So
yeah.
And here's what a lot of people don't know. I grew up with Brady Boone. His name was Dean Peters.
Wow.
And he was from Robbinsdale. I never thought he was going to get into wrestling, but I was on the road and everything. I heard he was breaking in the business, and I've known him forever. Just a great guy, and he was a gymnast. And when he got in the business, he was down in the Charlotte territory, and I had him stay with me and my wife for a few days, and I actually gave him my car, and I got a new car. So when he came. Yeah, and Rick Rude was the one that got him the job up in the WWF at the time. And so he learned how to work, went up there, and that was, one of his first matches that he had was up there.
And what a way to be introduced to the company, getting to work with one of your close friends. That is so cool.
Yeah, and then, he was such a nice guy and everything. He ended up becoming a referee up there. And so he had a good job.
And then didn't he go on, if I'm not mistaken, he went on to WCW. He was Battle Cat, wasn't he? Didn't they put him under a mask and he was the Battle Cat for a little while?
I don't know what his name was or what he had, but, it was terrible the night he passed away, because Wayne Bloom and myself, he just refereed in that Lee County, Fort Myers.
Okay.
Well, we had a TV taping down there in Fort Myers, and we haven't seen Brady for a while, and he was going to meet us that night. And so Wayne and I were at the Marriott by the airport in Tampa waiting for him, and he didn't show up. And he got a call from the church that there was a domestic that he was going to go help, the people get through. And he went off the median and rolled his van, and that's how he got killed that night. Terrible deal.
That is terrible. And if anybody out there in YouTube land or even on Spotify, I see that there's a lot of reviews that are left for our podcast, the audio version on Spotify. You can correct me, but I could have sworn he was also Battle Cat in WCW. Off the top of my head, that just popped in. I may be wrong, but I may be right. Let me know in the comments.
But when he was told that we were going to leave him laying a few times and everything, he was so excited to take these bumps and do all that. That was just like, he was like the perfect enhancement guy to make it happen for the Demolition.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, there's a lot of guys from that era that really made a name for themselves in that role. I mean, you got the Brooklyn Brawler, Steve Lombardi.
Yep.
Who to this day, I mean, you guys probably run into at these conventions, and he's got a line of people that want to get their picture taken with the Brooklyn Brawler.
He's got action figures and everything. I mean, he was there for years. Very successful.
He was probably there longer than anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. From the office after, and he had a job forever.
Yeah, I think it was Howard Finkel and then him. I think those were like the two most tenured employees.
A fun one was Barry Horowitz, though.
Was just going to mention Barry.
Barry was a great guy. He traveled with us every once in a while. I went to the gym with him, and he worked hard. And he wanted to get a top spot so bad, but they just didn't give him that opportunity at all. So he just put people over. He was middle to bottom guy. and just a nice guy.
Nicest guy. And you know what's funny? The late Chris Candido, who I considered a friend, who's been gone for a long time now as well. They had a little bit of a run there where it was actually Chris's idea, where he was like, look, he's like, they're not doing anything with me at the moment. He goes, and I like Barry. So they did a series where Chris put over Barry like 2 or 3 times in a row. And it was hilarious. It was like a classic old school comedy match because, you know, Candido, as Skip from the Body Donnas, had Sonny out at ringside. Yeah. And he'd be doing his push-ups like, oh, this guy's, you know, he's what a jabron. There's nothing. And Barry rolled him up and pinned him. And then, you know, a week later, I'm going to get my revenge. And then something else happened and Barry rolled him up. And it looked like for a little while there that they were going to do something with Barry Horowitz. I just did the pat on the back, which is what he was known for. They made a T-shirt with the handprint. And they, you know, but it wound up after that Candido run. I think they did have something with him and Hakushi for a little bit. Where they were teaming them up, but it just didn't really pan out.
You know, and a lot of people don't know that Barry Horowitz was an amateur wrestler. You know, he was a stud. He probably could have stretched quite a few of the guys in the ring that were beating him up.
Without a doubt.
And an intelligent guy. He could do an interview.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just a matter of some company, some territory could have utilized Barry in a positive position.
Then, of course, we have to talk about somebody that I got to meet right before he passed away. And I will treasure this memory of getting to spend 3 hours talking to Leapin' Lanny Poffo, who went on to become the Genius, managing Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. And in that role, he actually defeated the immortal Hulk Hogan via countout. And just what an amazing guy, very funny guy. Eccentric, but you just couldn't help but enjoy being around him. The stuff that he would say and the conviction in which he spoke. It was what a character with the Frisbees and everything like that. In fact, Tommy Fierro, the manager for Demolition, he actually has the Frisbee that he caught as a young boy at the Meadowlands from Leapin' Lanny Poffo. Was he as fun in the locker room as he was years later when I got to meet him? What a character.
Lanny was an excellent worker, and I got the impression that he always thought he was less than his brother, Savage. But Lanny was a good athlete and a good performer, and of course he did a great interview. He just put himself down. I don't know what transpired with the intermingling with the family or whatever, but Lanny was a good guy.
I love that you said that, Bill, because I didn't feel comfortable enough stating that because I didn't really know the man other than my brief 2 meetings with him. But even during that 3-hour virtual signing, he would say things like, you know, I wasn't blessed with the talent of my brother. I didn't have the skill level of my brother. And he said that like, you know, I would say probably a dozen times over the 3 hours to the point of where it made me start to feel like a little uncomfortable. I mean, yeah, he wasn't as big of a star or didn't have the name value of his brother, but you watch some of those matches with Lanny Poffo from back then, and he could go just as well as anybody.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Bill and I were with him, just maybe a week, 2 weeks before he passed away?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That Bill, it was like, holy cow, what happened? You know, he just came from, you know, where was he living at?
Ecuador, I think.
Yes, it was Ecuador.
Yeah, he just came back to do a few signings and everything, and then just right after that's when he passed away. You know.
Yeah, I was friends with him on Facebook. He was posting pictures. He went to go see a Broadway play, and he posted, I guess, like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. He was with a friend of his, and then you know the next day is when I got word that that he had passed. It was
you know who my favorite job guy was?
Hit me.
Barry Darsow.
Okay.
When I got down to WCW, I was putting guys over, and I didn't mind doing it that stage of my career because I was at the end of it. And you know, I put over Bill Goldberg. I put over just about everybody. I worked with Chris Benoit. I worked with, you know, all the top guys, and I loved it. Boss man, everybody. So I have to say he was my favorite job guy.
Now you know him well?
What's that?
Do you know him well?
I know him a little bit, but he owes me money, I think. You know, that son of a gun.
Now that you mention that, And we're going to talk about it on a future episode because I loved Barry Hole-in-One Darso. First of all, seeing you as Repo Man was a trip because I feel like Demolition Smash himself was very animated. You could watch those promos where, the way you'd widen your eyes and pucker your lips out or stick your tongue out. Like, you could tell that you were a character that wanted to get out there. And then with Repo Man, you got to do all of that. But Barry Hole-in-One Darso was hilarious. And there's been a rumor that's been circulated around for years. And I'm sure you've probably been asked this in other shit interviews, but this is your podcast, so let's get it out there. Is it true that as part of that amnesia gimmick, they wanted you in WCW to come out one week dressed as Repo Man, come out another week dressed as Demolition Smash, and they were going to just call you different names, and that WWE got wind of it? Is there any truth to that rumor?
Well, they were talking about it, but I didn't really hear what happened. And the WWE probably did talk to him and say, hey, you can't do that or something, but I heard that same rumor too, but I'm the last to find out if it's really going to happen or not, but I thought it would have been fun.
That would have been a great time.
Because, at that time of my life, I wasn't a serious wrestler. I was there just having fun with all the guys. And I actually had a pretty good contract down there, and I never even worked. I mean, it was the most money I ever made in my life per match because I only had 3 matches in a year. I mean, it was incredible,
As a comedian, I have to give you props, though, for your deadpan delivery. I mean, when you would set up to putt in the ring before the match, I mean, it was, and you just sold it so well, it was just classic stuff. And I feel like not enough people talk about it. It was great. Running down the list of some of the other guys that you got to work with. And in our last episode, we were talking about how Demolition was being phased out. And Axe, Bill, you had said, what the company back then under that regime used to do to guys on their way out. I have to mention this because this was something that I found out when doing research for our previous episode. And it really blew my mind because I don't remember it. When Demolition Crush debuted in 1990, there was a match where Demolition took on a job tag team on Wrestling Challenge. It was a gentleman by the name of Troy Williams and his partner, Rugged Ronnie Garvin. And when I found this out 3 nights ago, I was like, when the hell did Ronnie Garvin just get paired with some random guy to job out on Wrestling Challenge? 3 years prior, he was the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. He beat Nature Boy Ric Flair for the title. And now here he is 3 years later as a job guy on Wrestling Challenge after having that feud that lasted over a year with Greg the Hammer Valentine. Do you guys remember having that match? And if so, did it strike you as odd that Ronnie Garvin was going to have a 2-minute squash match against Demolition?
I honestly don't remember the match, but it doesn't surprise me if it was like we said earlier, at that time, WWE, WWF, whatever, didn't acknowledge that there was any other wrestling companies. So if you weren't one of their guys, you were insignificant. So, and yeah, you're right. Ronnie, we see Ronnie, we saw him probably 2 or 3 months ago, still looks rugged, Ronnie.
Yeah.
He still looks like he could knock you out. A good guy, good talent. But for some reason, if you aren't in the fold, then you don't exist.
And what's hard when you're working with somebody like Ronnie, and then you're working with, an enhancement guy, it's like you have to treat him different than you do the other guy. Because you still have to kind of put him over, but you still have to be, get over on him and really get over on the other guy. So it kind of makes a different match because you can't hurt him. And he's been around long enough to know that he's going to go in there and he's going to, still be a top guy. So it's kind of different,
That ties into my next question because when you guys would go to these different towns for these TV tapings, did you have any say in, I'd like to work with this guy or that guy, or was it just like you're working with this guy or that guy? Like if you had favorites that you liked working with, because it seems to me like, there were certain towns that had the veteran legendary jobbers that we all know, but then there were some guys that would just be brought in maybe because their trainer gave them the rub and they got the job. And there was just all these different things. You hear stories about the Hardy Boys who went on to become one of the biggest tag teams of all time. They were like 17 years old and somehow got WWE office to let them go out there and do these TV tapings. Like, was there any kind of input that you guys had, or did you just have to show up and do what you were told?
Well, most of the time, I would say probably 98% of the time that they just pair two guys, or if you're a single match, they just give you an opponent, and that's done in advance because they really don't know who's going to show up. They know the guys that they have, but they don't know if Joe Jones and Robert Smith or who else, these other guys are going to show up. So when they do, if they've been there before, of course, they're going to use them. If they get a reference from one of the guys that they've had a number of times, say, oh, he's good talent, use him. But if everybody had a chance, you'd always be picking the same guy.
That's true.
Or the same 3 or 4 guys, because you always knew you were going to have a great match.
Yeah,
So
and I don't,
we didn't have that opportunity.
yeah, and I don't know how those guys felt about going against us. I've never really asked everybody, but I don't think we ever hurt anybody. It's kind of funny because, like when you're in WCW or the NWA or whatever, they have a chalkboard and they'd have everybody who's working with everybody, and they'd turn that chalkboard over and you'd have all the enhancement guys in a room, and all of a sudden you'd see Road Warriors against, and you could just see the guys go, oh,
I've heard that.
And I don't know if they did that with us, Bill. Maybe that was the same for us. Maybe they started names and went, holy shit, you got these guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that from the conversations that we had over the years, I would say there again, probably 90% of the talent wanted to work with us because they knew they were going to have a good match. You weren't going to get hurt. And we weren't out there to hurt guys. We were out there, of course, to look good. But when I was brought up and Barry was brought up in this business, the number one rule is to protect your opponent. If anybody's going to get hurt, if it's singles or tag, it's going to be us, not them.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the case. That wasn't the case for a lot of guys.
No,
that's not the case now, from what I hear.
And there must be something with the Warrior moniker, because I've heard that about guys that had to take on the Road Warriors, but I've also heard that a lot about the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, guys that were great established wrestlers and stars said that they did not want to work the Ultimate Warrior. And I remember some of those like Wrestling Challenge and Superstar tapings where it would be the Warrior against an unknown talent or a jobber. And I mean, you watch some of those matches back and you're like, holy shit, it looks like I'm watching an MMA fight. I mean, I remember there was a situation that occurred over a span of a couple of weeks where they had this thing where the Warrior was taking guys and putting them over his shoulder and carrying them back down the aisle into the locker room, and he would just drop them like on the concrete floor like it was nothing. And it was like, oh my God, like, so you hear horror stories about situations like that. And that's why when you had said, Barry, that people would look at the Road Warriors on the chalkboard and go, ugh, I'm sure that happened.
But you know what, though? You could work with the Road Warriors too, and they don't even touch you, and they look like they're killing you too. So, I mean, it's just sometimes they get pretty stiff.
Yeah.
And they don't mind being stiff back either. But, back to the Warrior now, he was just clumsy, what he did. I mean, he knocked my teeth out one time, my 2 teeth, and just with an elbow, and it was not that he tried to, it was just, that's what happens when you work with him.
Yeah.
Right, Bill? He's just kind of clumsy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the being stiff, there's a difference between being snug and protective and being stiff and careless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can be stiff and hurt people, but you can be snug and it looks perfectly good and not hurt people. So,
and our finish was so easy on the enhancement guys because I'd put them over my knee, and when Bill, as soon as he'd hit the elbow on the chest, I would flip him. So he'd hardly hit him. And, I mean, it was
Yeah.
an easy bump to take. So, some of the guys, though, with these enhancement guys, their finishes are like, holy cow, I wouldn't take their finish, doing flips in the air. And, it's like, holy cow. The enhancement guys are the most unbelievable guys in the world.
Steven Richards has a great podcast on YouTube, and he actually has a green screen where he breaks different things down. And he actually had a whole segment that he did about Yokozuna, where he says, watch Yokozuna do that bonsai drop on a main roster talent. He goes, and now watch Yokozuna do that bonsai drop on a job guy. And it's like, you watch it and you go, ooh, okay. Like you could definitely see a difference. But Bill, you talking about the difference between stiff and snug, that leads me to a jobber that I have a personal connection with and a lot of fondness for. And I think some would make the argument that he's the greatest jobber of all time. And of course, I'm talking about Iron Mike Sharp. And the reason that I thought of him, which I was going to bring him up in this episode anyway, but when you said stiff versus snug, one of my favorite stories that I ever heard from Mike Sharp personally as a young kid was when he was talking about Jim Duggan. And he said, oh, Jim Duggan, great guy, snug bastard. And I had no idea. I had no idea as a kid what that meant. But that just popped into my head as you told that story. Iron Mike Sharp, I mean, a legend in Canada, right? Incredible career out there, and then just went to WWE, and he was the guy on TV. Hulking physique, ornery character, but Iron Mike Sharp was going to lose every damn match you saw him in. You just knew it.
Well, Iron Mike was very, very talented, and they were actually going to push. When I first went into WWF as a mass superstar, Mike had already been in there, and they were contemplating giving him a good push because he had all the qualities. He could do an interview. He looked the part. He was snug. Mike wasn't real stiff, but he was snug on the verge of being stiff.
Okay.
Well, when he hit you with that forearm, that was stiff.
Yeah. But they were going to give him a push. And I know 2 occasions that I was there. One was in Allentown and another was in Hamburg. We were doing TV, and he missed the promos. And then the next show, he missed the promos again. He was working out at home, and then he was, Mike's idiosyncrasies.
Yeah.
He had to have, even if he went for a drive, he'd have to take 5 rolls of toilet paper and 4 bars of soap and, whatever, three sticks of deodorant, just because of these
OCD.
problems that he had.
Yeah.
And, but he missed the promos, and they said, the hell with it, we're not going to do it. And then his stock just dropped from a potential main eventer down to mid-card and just, putting guys over. But
how about the time when he got locked in the building, Bill? Tell him that one.
Twice. He got locked in the building. He was working out. He worked on an early match. There again, he was late.
Okay.
He missed the interviews. He came in. Of course, he had to work out. He started working out about 4 o'clock. The matches aren't till about 7. He's doing his squats, Hindu squats, push-ups, this, whatever. He does his match. He continues doing his workout for about 2 or 3 hours. Now it's after 11 o'clock. All the matches are over. They tore the ring down. They closed the building. He's locked in.
It was the Boston Garden, if I'm not mistaken, right?
One of them was Allentown, and I think Boston Garden as well. It was more than one time.
Wow.
But he had to get his workout in. People don't know about Mike. He had these little idiosyncrasies. When he came into the locker room, he had to put on his shoes and take off his dress shoes and socks. And he put newspaper all over the floor. And then he'd step on the newspaper, and everything else had to be set aside. Well, then he'd put his sock on, and if there was a wrinkle in the sock, it might take Mike 45 minutes to put his socks on, because they had to be done just perfect. And then when he did that, he had to put his wrestling boots on and lace them up. Well, he might get them laced up. I don't know if people remember them, if you can visualize wrestling boots, but there's probably 25 holes in each side. And he might get up to hole 13, 14, and there's a little kink in it. He takes them all out, starts all over again.
I'm glowing as you're telling these stories because I think I told you guys when I first met you how I got quote unquote smartened up to the business was in the town that my family moved to when I was 6 or 7 years old, Brick, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore, not far from Asbury Park. We're hour to New York City, hour to Philadelphia. Iron Mike Sharp had a wrestling school. It was called Iron Mike Sharp School of Professional Wrestling. It was in a strip mall that had a Palmer video store. And it also had a hair salon where my mother would get her hair done. And I remember like when my mom would have like an afternoon, early evening appointment, I'd be like, let me go with you because I would go into Mike Sharp's school and watch the guys training. And that's how I learned that wrestling was quote unquote fake because I got to see Steven Richards, Crowbar, Devin Storm, Simon Dean, who was Nova and ECW. I would say those were probably Mike's 3 top students, but it was great to just go there and experience that. And it would be cool because sometimes on a Monday night, Mike Sharp would be doing a Raw taping up at the Manhattan Center. And these guys would be training in the ring and they'd have a little TV set up to watch Mike. And Mike would bring those guys, his top students, to the TV tapings. That's why I'd asked, like, did they get vouched for or whatever? Because Mike would bring his students to do these different tapings. And he used my friend Mike Tarras, who still wrestles for ISPW, as main event Michael Mars. Mike Moraldo, who was Ace Darling. He has the Wrestling Then and Now podcast. All those guys got to work as WWE job guys through Mike Sharp. And what a character. And just as a kid, to see this guy who was a character on TV and realize, oh, wait a minute, he's even crazier off camera. I mean, great guy, but the stories he would tell, Davey Boy Smith, when he used to have the braids, he'd be like, oh, I chopped them and beads everywhere. And just such an animated guy. And one of my last memories, his school had left that, strip mall in Bricktown, and it had moved over to Asbury Park. And it was not when Asbury Park was at its highest heights that it is now. It was a rough area, rough school. And I had a buddy, Matt Luongo, who wrestled as Shockwave on the New Jersey Independence, and his tire went flat in the parking lot. And it was like mid-February, freezing cold. And Matt was a kid. He was 17. He didn't know how to change his tire yet or whatever. And Mike Sharp came out and changed his flat. But what was funny about it was like 30 degrees and wind blowing right off the beach. And Mike was in a tank top, an Ico Pro tank top, and a pair of workout shorts. All of his clothes were WWE t-shirts that I guess he collected while he was at the tapings. And then unfortunately, he just kind of disappeared for years and no one really knew what had happened. We had heard that, he was living with his mother in Toronto, but what a character. And I feel like he's up there with the Brooklyn Brawler and some of those other names that when you think of jobbers from that era, his name comes to mind. Another guy that I want to touch on and see if you have any stories about, argument could be made that he's also the greatest jobber of all time because he had his own action figure, and that's SD Special Delivery Jones. Why did he never get a push? He was so charismatic. The people loved him. What was the logic of keeping him on that level of lower mid card?
I really don't know. He was talented. It might have been his interviews. Maybe he didn't feel comfortable doing interviews. But he was pretty strong in the middle card, though. And he was there for a long time, number of years.
Yeah, he had a good body, he looked good, everything, and he was a nice guy too. Yeah, I didn't know him real well, but I couldn't. You would think he'd be more of a top guy, going back and forth, but he never really got a shot when I was there.
Yeah. I mentioned Mike Sharp having the wrestling school in Brick, New Jersey and Asbury Park, and he did have some breakout students, and with Chris Candido would show up and Bam Bam Bigelow to work with them because they were Jersey guys. And I would say at one point when I started being around the independents in New Jersey in the late 90s, I would say a good 40 to 50% of the top talent on the indies in the whole entire Northeast, a lot of them came from Mike Sharp's school. But I think when you talk about trainers and people that are really responsible for, progressing the next crop of talent. There's a jobber from WWF that comes to mind, and that's the unpredictable Johnny Rodz,
Oh
who
yeah.
had his wrestling school in Brooklyn, which I believe still exists to this day. I mean, it's amazing to me that, these guys that were relegated to these preliminary wrestler roles are somehow the best at teaching the next crop of talent how to become superstars.
Well, they were technicians. Johnny, I remember going to Johnny's gym a couple times just to meet up with him, and we'd leave for towns from there. Good guy, and had a very lucrative school. Lots of guys went through there.
A lot of guys went through there. Some big names have come through Johnny Rod's school, and I just always found that fascinating. That when you think of pro wrestling schools, now there's a lot of them that some legitimate talent. I mean, Cody Rhodes has the Nightmare Factory. Bubba Ray Dudley has, or Bully Ray, I'm sorry, has the Team 3D Academy. But when you think of like Iron Mike Sharp and Johnny Rodz, these were guys that you never really saw win on TV, but they wound up training some incredible talents. Of course, then there's Salvatore Bellomo, the Italian stallion, Mario Mancini. The list can go on and on and on. But again, when we mention these names,
when you mentioned Mario, I think we had our first match with him.
First match in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah.
As Demolition.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's hard too is, like the Demolition's getting this big push, and you know what you have to do. And then you go against a jobber that is really a good worker that you could have a good match with. But they tell you got 3 minutes, and you got 1 minute to get to the ring and take your stuff off the announce and everything. By the time you have your match and everything, you got a minute and a half. You can't give them a good match. You got to take the whole match, and then what that is just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
It's kind of a tough thing when you just, you're taking advantage of people,
It's what they're getting paid to do, but that was going to lead me to a question that I had for you guys. Did you ever encounter, when you were in WWE during that initial run from 87 through 90, did you ever encounter jobbers that you were like, no, we're going to do it this way? Were there ever any guys that tried to overstep their bounds as far as suggesting what to do in a match, or they wanted a little too much from you? Did you ever run across any of that?
Not in our run there, but when I was in Japan as Mass Superstar, that happened a couple times. Yeah, but that's the only way the young boys in Japan can go up the ladder. But fortunately, I was educated on my first tour over there not to be one of the guys that is taken advantage of.
Okay.
Just fight for your position and let them know who's going to be the boss.
Now,
that does happen.
Do they do that to you because you're American? Do they pull that with some of the Japanese talent that's there all the time? Like, do they try to get one over on the American guy?
I not only American guys, any gaijin, anybody that's not Japanese, they try. That's the only way they can move up the ladder.
Interesting.
But fortunately for me, I mean, on my first trip, my tag team partner at the time, the guy broke me in, Guido Mongo. From the time we got on the plane in Pittsburgh to the time we got off the plane in Tokyo, he was in my ear. Don't let this happen. Don't let that happen. Don't let this happen. And I think we talked about it earlier. I could have gone through the cement and concrete and steel at the airport right into the ring because I knew one thing wasn't going to happen. Nobody was going to take advantage of me.
Yeah.
I might get beat up. He might be able to beat me up, but he's going to know he was in a battle.
Great way of looking at things. So we've established, we've run down a pretty long list of jobbers, but I think we can all agree that our favorite one is Barry Darsow, which, I would have never thought to consider you one of those, but I was just
believe that.
Well, but I was just so highly entertained by that end run that you were having in WCW, and I love your attitude about it, saying I was making more money than I'd ever made in my career. I had a great contract. Yeah, I'm going to have fun. And I think that is such a key attitude, not just for the wrestling business, but anything in life. And it kind of brings me back to what we were talking about with Ronnie Garvin, because 3 nights ago when I'm doing research for this episode and I find out they were jobbing Ronnie Garvin on Wrestling Challenge, I remember an interview he did with, I believe it was Hannibal TV, and I apologize if I'm mistaken because there's so many different, shoot interviews out there or whatever. But he was doing an interview and they asked him about his run as NWA World Champion and if he was upset with the fact that his run was so short. And he said no. He said, because, I love being involved in this business, but I have other things in my life that I enjoy doing. I like being a pilot and I like to do all these different things. He goes, when you're the NWA World Champion in that era, that was your life. That's all you could do, which is why Ric Flair, he said, not taking anything away from Ric Flair. He's an incredible talent, but Ric Flair had it so many times because Flair didn't mind being on the road 7 days a week and flying here, flying there. He's like, I didn't want that. So I think sometimes from a fan's perspective, and I've been guilty of this as a fan myself, we look at a talent that we feel isn't being pushed enough or isn't being used the right way. And we go, damn it, they deserve more or they should have gotten this. In some cases, maybe they don't want that. Maybe these guys are happy doing what they're doing. So to hear you say that you were having so much fun going out there and putting everybody over.
Well, what's funny is, Eric took care of me, for the spot that I had. I worked with Fit Finlay. I worked with Chris Benoit. I worked with the Boss Man. I worked with all these top guys, and my job was to make them look good, and they made me look good. It was just like back to what I was saying. We had 6, 7, 8 minutes, so then I got to get my stuff in. So I didn't look like I was, just getting my ass kicked the whole time. So we could actually have a good match, and now that made them better, because now they beat somebody.
Yeah.
And to me, it was so much fun to have a good match because all these guys they were freaking incredible, great to work with. And that's what the whole wrestling business was about, is to work with good guys that you're going to have good matches with.
Well, now that we know that you're such a legendary jobber, we have to ask, can we get Barry Darsow merch on Pro Wrestling Tees? It should be out there.
It should be out there. I really believe that. And you know what? I'd give a percentage to you two guys too. And Dan. Get me over.
Dan, the man behind the curtain. But this
Dan's a tough producer, isn't he?
Oh yeah.
He's like Vince McMahon of producing. He wants me to get this mic, and I've had like 5 or 6 mics that don't work and the sound's bad, and it's like, well, give it to me, whatever it has,
Well, unlike Vince, I don't have somebody like Dan screaming in my headphones, which is good. There's just a little scrolling chat where he reminds me of certain things every once in a while, and I'm very thankful for that. But this has been a lot of fun, and I'm actually at a different podcast studio tonight. I'm at a Shared Universe podcast studio in the Bellworks building, which is a beautiful building in New Jersey. And the producer, Vic, that's been running the show here tonight, he's my engineer on this end. He was like, oh my God, Demolition. He goes, this is so cool. And that's kind of interesting because the last studio I was at, it was the same thing. So that's what I love about doing this podcast too. Not only do I get to know more about you guys who I loved watching when I was a kid, it's just so much fun to introduce this to people because again, you guys have both had careers that were lengthy and you've done a lot, but as a tag team, you've been out of the mainstream since 1990. So to have you guys back out there and to see these YouTube comments coming in, we put up that Hulk Hogan episode and it really did very, very well. And people started commenting like, I never even knew Demolition had a podcast. This is great. So I love being able to do these topics. And again, here we are talking about jobbers, and then you drop that gem about, Barry Darsow was a jobber. And I'm like, you know what? I never even thought of that. So it's cool to always do these different topics and get to discuss these things. But we have a lot of different stuff coming up. And yes, Dan just gave me a production note. The show Severance on Apple TV is filmed in this building where I'm sitting right now. That is correct. See, Dan does drop those gems.
So Ryan,
he knows everything.
Yeah.
So Ryan, when's your next comedy show? We need to plug you a little bit.
All right. So I will be, I don't know exactly when this episode is going up. I think in the next couple of weeks, I will be in Milton, Delaware at the Milton Theater on September 13th. That's a Friday night. September 20th, I'm going to be in beautiful Bayonne, New Jersey. I know, stop bragging. And then where am I going to be September 27th? Oh, Feasterville, Pennsylvania at the Buck Hotel. So that's going to be the September gigs coming up, but they can find that information out at Ryan Maher Comedy. And of course, at Search and Destroy You, you guys have a lot of stuff coming up. And like I said in the last episode, we have some guests lined up. I want to hear a little bit about, before we get out of here, these new action figures that you're going to be debuting at WrestleCade, I believe, right?
Yeah. And Matt Maniacs with Nerd Closet, they've got I think we're the third one. I think they have the Steiners, then Legion of Doom, and then now us. And it's exclusive for WrestleCade. And they're really neat. If anybody wants to see them, check them out on Search and Destroy You. They're really neat, and they're going to be. We'll be there if you get them in advance. We'll be there, and we can sign them for you. And it's just for WrestleCade itself.
Okay. And Dan is actually mentioning in the chat right now on the side of my screen that they're available for pre-order now. So definitely go to Search and Destroy You on Instagram and place those orders, because there's a lot of different stuff that's going to be coming out, not just as part of your WWE Legends deals, but you guys have a lot of deals in place with these independent toy makers. And Bill did send me some incredible pictures of these figures. They look amazing. I mean, it's mind-blowing to think what is out there with some of these independent toy makers and what they're capable of doing. And I think it's a really exciting time for any memorabilia collector or wrestling fan in general. So make sure you check that out. Search and Destroy You on Instagram, Demolition Pod on Instagram. That's where we're taking the questions and also show ideas. And guys, we are so thankful that you're so active with the YouTube comments. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the YouTube link around. We're also available on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it, we're on it. But spread the word about this podcast. Keep the questions, comments, and fun stuff going on. And now Axe brought us the stuff right here. This is the goods. We were just talking about it. The WrestleCade 2025 exclusive Matt Maniacs Demolition 2-pack. It is available now. Online for pre-order, you go to thenerdclosetonline.com. Thenerdclosetonline.com. And I can even just tell, look at how cool that box is.
Yeah, Ryan, I tell you, I'm excited about this thing because you look at that, look at the back.
That is awesome.
They did a great job, and this is at the WrestleCade. It's for that show, so it's a big deal.
I had the Hasbros as a kid, and I remember I got so pissed because I lost one of those masks. They had the mask accessories that they put on over your head, and I lost them. And it seems like they captured them for this one, too. So if you get these action figures, don't lose the masks, all right? And look at how cool that is.
You know what, though? They look so much better in person than they do on that screen, too. When they're, the real thing, they're sharp.
No, that's really cool. So make sure, everybody, if you want to pre-order those, because they're going to sell out and they're a WrestleCade exclusive, you got to go to the nerdclosetonline.com. Get those pre-orders in for those Demolition 2-pack action figures, and you're going to be signing them there that weekend. That's going to be awesome.
It'll be a fun time. It'll be great to see everybody.
You guys, all the fans always talk about how both of you guys, Axe and Smash, are two of the most fan-friendly guys at these conventions, and it really is true. That's how I met you guys for the first time. At Tommy Fierro's 80s Wrestling Con. It was before we did any business, before we did the virtual signings during the pandemic. You guys go all out and you really give the fans an incredible experience, and they're very fortunate to get that opportunity. So if you have the chance to be a part of WrestleCade or any upcoming convention that Demolition is a part of, make sure you don't hesitate and you get those tickets. This has been a lot of fun talking with you guys. As always, we're going to be back with more very, very soon. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. I'm Ryan Maher. That's Barry Smash Darso. Axe, thank you for providing this information for us.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you so much, too. You did a great job.
Thanks, man. We'll see you guys real soon.
Here comes the